Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment here as more people are joining. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending this evening. My name is Barry McKnight. I'm the Access and Engagement Manager at the La Crosse Public Library, and this is our third time hosting the Enduring Families Project and their next release of videos. Before we go further, we'd like to acknowledge that the La Crosse Public Library, where my colleagues and I are broadcasting from tonight, occupies the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. If you'd like to learn more about the history of the land we occupy, you can contact the La Crosse Public Library Archives and Local History Department, and they can help you with your research. So as I said before, this is our third time. That's our pleasure to host the Enduring Families Project. And as most of you know, the Enduring Families Project mission is to broaden the narrative of the positive portrayal of the contributions, struggles, and perseverance of early local Black historical figures, providing a venue for the development of understanding and respect between people in our community and a springboard for community conversations. The Enduring Families Project is a program of the La Crosse County Historical Society. In partnership with the Enduring Families Project, the La Crosse Public Library Archives and Local History Department created a contextual video, sort of a broad strokes about the history of Black folks in La Crosse and La Crosse area. Some of the voice talent are actors from previous and current videos. To introduce that video before we start with the Enduring Families Project ones, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jenny DeRoter. Jenny.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Barry. So as Barry kind of already said, EFP requested that we make a video that kind of allows us all to really imagine what La Crosse really would have been like for folks living in the 19th to 20th century version of our city. So we hope that this really gives you some context to the important personal stories that EFP tells about key Black American figures in our local history. And because I'm your local history librarian, I just have to mention that the primary sources that you see and hear are all available for our learning because of libraries and archives and historical societies who all collect and preserve and make our world's cultural heritage more accessible for you, our public. So just think about that, I guess, as you watch this video, as well as maybe you can connect it to previous videos you've watched from EFP and then hopefully also the future ones that you watch. So go ahead, Levy, and you can play it.
In the second half of the 19th century, La Crosse was home to a bustling community. At the time, La Crosse was a pioneer town that supported a diverse population of migrants and immigrants of European descent, Black American refugees and exiles who fled the South, as well as an undocumented number of Ho-Chunk. While the focus of research on early La Crosse history has often been white pioneer settlers, today we can learn about some of our community's historic Black residents. Some of these residents were foundational in our community. Some changed the course of national history. We're able to study these people because of primary sources and dedicated historians. For example, most of this history has come to light thanks to the diligent work of historian Bruce Mauser and UWL Special Collections librarian Edwin Hill, who together spent decades collecting information on La Crosse's Black history. Eventually, Mauser compiled his research and published a book called Black La Crosse, Wisconsin, 1850 to 1906, Settlers, Entrepreneurs, and Exodusters. Mauser used primary sources to prove that hundreds of Black residents lived in La Crosse in the 19th century. He tracked families and individuals in sources like state and federal census records, city directories, newspapers, and tax records. His book, Black Lacrosse, allows us to read through what the daily lives looked like for many of these residents, how and why they came to La Crosse, where they lived in the city, where they worked, and what their community and family relationships looked like. Thanks to the groundbreaking primary research completed by Mauser and other researchers, we are now able to celebrate many of the real-life people through history programs like the Enduring Families Project. The La Crosse Public Library Archives and Local History Department holds and makes accessible many of the primary sources that enables this research of local Black history. Archivists at the public library collect and preserve these resources to help further our community's education. In this video, we will help contextualize the intersectional and real lives of the people portrayed by the Enduring Families Project. First, let's begin with an overview of the migration of colonists to the area.
What is now called the city of La Crosse occupies land that was once a prairie that was home to a band of Ho-Chunk. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, an attempt to forcibly and often violently remove indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands. Throughout the 1830s and 1840s, the federal government conducted a series of 6 attempts to forcibly remove local Ho-Chunk by steamboat to reservations west of the Mississippi River. However, many of La Crosse's Ho-Chunk found their way back to their homeland, and eventually the federal and local governments moved on to new strategies to eradicate indigenous folks and culture from the newly established United States of America. Mauser argued that in 1848, the last formal removal of the Ho-Chunk people marked the transition of La Crosse from a fur trading village to a frontier community. La Crosse was incorporated as a city not even 10 years later in 1856. Early colonizers in La Crosse, black and white alike, were attracted to the area for a number of reasons. In the mid-1800s, La Crosse was a wide, open sand prairie, flat with few trees and just barely above the floodline. To the colonizers arriving, it was perfect for development. The shape of the river near what is today Riverside Park also provided a natural harbor which helped shape La Crosse as a major shipping center. As a prominent upper Mississippi River town, La Crosse was a convenient location on the heavily trafficked riverway. People arrived in La Crosse on a steamboat at first and later in the 1860s by railway. For a time, La Crosse sported the nickname Gateway City because it was the last stop on the railroad before crossing the Mississippi into the Great West. La Crosse was a place for opportunity and cheap land, which made it the 3rd largest city in the state for many decades in Wisconsin's history. Black American refugees fleeing the South were drawn to La Crosse for the same reasons that white settlers were. It was a relatively easy western city to travel to and had promise for unskilled laborers looking for industrial jobs, as well as entrepreneurs looking for inexpensive property to start their business. By looking at the data collected by Mauser, it is easy to see that many black residents in the 1800s came to La Crosse to settle with other family members, sometimes even working in the same trade and living together in the same house or on the same street. Other black settlers came to La Crosse for guaranteed employment thanks to networking they did in southern states during the Civil War. For example, one prominent settler, Nathan Smith, worked for General Cadwallader Washburn during the Civil War. When Washburn came back to La Crosse after the war, Nathan Smith came with him.
In this way, when black migrants arrived in La Crosse, it wasn't rare for them to already have a job lined up, as a barber apprentice in their in-law's shop or working as a valet for a wealthy white family on Cass Street. Others found jobs working in hotels, restaurants, large homes, or barbershops. This kind of service work was the most common for black Americans in La Crosse. Of course, there was plenty of laborer work that didn't require many skills, but paid solid wages in the railroad and shipping industries. One historic photograph shows men building a road in La Crosse, and a number of black men can be seen in the group. Other black settlers were prominent entrepreneurs. The Moss family was well renowned for owning and operating one of the best barbershops in town. John Birney was another popular barber, who was also a land speculator. His daughters were at the top of their school class and were expected to go far by their teachers. Most of La Crosse's black residents of the time clustered in a few neighborhoods around the city. Because of the nature of the service and shipping industry, many found themselves living near their work in La Crosse's downtown. Others, who worked as domestics for wealthy estates, often lived in the servant quarters or the carriage houses of the families who employed them. One example is the Pogue family, who lived on the Easton estate for many years. George Coleman Pogue utilized the same library in the home as the Easton children, and even tutored them in the French and German languages. Other black residents lived in the 1000 block of Pine and Vine Streets. The north side was also a popular neighborhood. Mill Street, which is now Copeland Avenue, was home to a number of black families. Some black migrants chose to make their homes on farms and in rural settlements. One of Wisconsin's largest rural black settlements was in the Cheyenne Valley near Hillsboro, not far from La Crosse.
Mauser's book, Black Lacrosse, spanned the years 1850 to 1906, because in the second half of the 19th century, La Crosse supported a 1 to 2% black population. However, by 1910, this number had dropped to 0.002%, and it stayed below 1% for the next 90 years, until the 2000 census. This is a common story for many Wisconsin and Midwest communities. Mauser explained this population disparity as the outcome of the economic depression that came to La Crosse in the 1890s, after the lumber boom had crashed, leaving La Crosse scrambling to redefine its industrial identity to fix the general unemployment issue. Mauser theorized that if white working-class residents couldn't find jobs, how were black Americans supposed to find jobs? He recognized that they faced discrimination in La Crosse, but did not attribute this as to why many migrated to other cities. Other historians contextualize this by looking at the nation as a whole. The period between the 1890s and early 1900s is characterized as the nadir, or the lowest point in American race relations, and the period of the most active anti-black racism and legal racial discrimination since the Civil War. This was marked by the establishment of the Jim Crow laws, an increase in racial-motivated lynchings, and escalated segregation throughout the U.S., and not just in the South. The nadir was only encouraged by white politicians in power, who realized that they were losing votes by advocating for racial equality, which had been a platform topic in the post-Civil War society. An attempt to appease their white voter base, these politicians made the choice to abandon race issues and black politicians. One black politician who watched this happen was La Crosse's George Edwin Taylor, who ran for presidency in 1904 to demonstrate to the white politicians that the black voter base was something to attract and consider in their platforms, rather than to abandon. The increase in anti-black discrimination strategies applied to many towns and cities in Wisconsin, including La Crosse. La Crosse enabled anti-black racism in the 20th century, which can be seen in instances of landlords not renting to black Americans, cemeteries having all-white clauses, newspapers using derogatory language, and stores hanging whites-only signs. There is evidence of these examples in primary sources held in our local archives. By 1980, La Crosse's population demographics began to change, with Hmong and Cuban refugees settling in the area. Black Americans began settling in La Crosse around this time too, and according to the recent census data, La Crosse supports a 2.5% black population today.
Of course, all history is complicated and nuanced, and it deserves more attention than this short summary. If you're interested in this, please explore the hundreds of resources available at your local library to learn more about the Jim Crow era and race relations in the 20th century U.S. Today, we can study and learn about this history through various lenses and embrace many legacies, whether that means repairing the rooted systemic racism in our local institutions or celebrating a number of black residents in our communities past and present. The Enduring Families Project gives us a glimpse into the extraordinary lives of some of these historic Black voices and shares their meaningful contributions to our community's history.
All right, well then with that contextual video, I'd like to turn it over to Denise Christie, and who can talk about the Enduring Families Project. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you for thank you for doing this for our project. The Enduring Families Project is the purpose is to dramatize the stories of early African-American residents who lived in La Crosse. And as you could see, there was a lot that this group had to work with, but somehow they thrived. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination it was easy, but the stories that we chose to dramatize were positive stories in spite of what was going on. That's why it's called an enduring project. They endured. This segment of videos focuses on three barber families that lived in the area. The Birneys, the Lydia Moss and family, and Zachariah Moss and family. I guess we will start with John Birney, a very prominent barber who lived in the area. He at one point had an 8-seat barber shop in the Augusta Hotel on 2nd and Pearl. When that burnt down, he founded his barbershop business again. Eventually, he and his family did leave La Crosse and go back to Kentucky. As Jenny's video showed, you know, the population just nosedived, and you could see, except for the Moss family, everybody else left, the Birneys included. But before they left their mark on La Crosse. Important thing to note that John Birney was one of the founders of what is today known as the La Crosse County Historical Society. So he did leave his mark on La Crosse. So this is his story.
I love this city and the river. My early morning walk along the river brings me peace before a busy day at my barber shop at 301 Main Street. On my walk, I watch for the occasional hawk or eagle. The quiet is often broken by noisy rosters unloading package ships that arrive overnight. My name is John Birney. I was a barber here in La Crosse for many years. Now here's a few interesting facts. I carry the name of a famous abolitionist named James Birney. He was a major voice for the anti-slavery movement and the first presidential candidate in 1844 for the Liberty Party. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1834. My wife, Penelope, was born in Louisiana in 1835. We arrived in La Crosse in 1857 with our infant daughter, Mary Ellen. Our family's wealth grew as the city grew. Over the years, I purchased over 10 lots between Sill and Rubley Streets. Today, you call that area the north side of La Crosse. My family lived on 11th and State. On that block, I built 5 separate houses. I imagine you enjoyed this walk too, but probably not in the winter. Oh, that wind blows icy cold off that river, doesn't it? How did John Levy make it through the first winters here in La Crosse? You know, he lived near what is now Front Street. He was only 24 years old. Wow, that sounds so young. John and I were good friends, but we never called each other by our first names. It was always Mr. Birney and Mr. Levy. It wasn't because of formality, or because my barbershop was in his hotel, or because he was white. It was because we both were named John. It was just too difficult when we were in the same place. Never knew who was being addressed. John Levy gets little credit for the founding of La Crosse. Most of that goes to other men. Yet he came here in 1848 and lived here 70 years later. Some left, others were driven away. John and I often talked about our lives. He was born in London to a Jewish family from Germany. I was a free black man born in Frankfort, Kentucky. John was 14 years older than me, and he came from a different race. But we both understood what fear and hatred can do to people. In fact, John and Elizabeth Williams, the first black people who lived in La Crosse, lived with John and Frederica Levy. They came to La Crosse in 1852 and stayed with the Levies for 5 years. Mr. Levy even helped John open his own barber shop next to his store. John and Elizabeth eventually built a home of their own in 1857. It was on 4th Street. People in La Crosse called him the gentleman's barber. John Levy owned the entire block of Pearl Street between 2nd and 3rd. This was where he built the Augusta Hotel. He named it after his wife, Frederica Augusta. The hotel had 100 rooms. My barbershop was on the main floor. Can you imagine the business that went through that hotel when La Crosse was a boom town in the 1850s? There were plenty of businessmen who needed shaves every morning in that 100-room hotel. I had an 8-chair barbershop, an unheard of accomplishment in the barber world. It was a very lucrative business. My business partner was Peter Cromwell. We called our shop the Birney and Cromwell Barbershop. His wife Julia and their son Alexander were also barbers there. They worked in along with 4 other barbers and their apprentices. Fire destroyed the Augusta Hotel. On March 19, 1862, the fire began on the roof, and because the Augusta was constructed of clapboard, the entire frame was consumed in 45 minutes. In 5 hours, the structure was gone. All 15 buildings on the block owned by John Levy, were gone. There was $71,000 worth of damage and only $10,000 worth of insurance. The guests in the building lost all their belongings, but thankfully, no lives were lost. John Levy became financially devastated. I found that it takes only a few $100s to reset up business. So I ended up walking away still holding on to my wealth. LaCrosse learned an important lesson. We were a logging town, but we needed to build with bricks. I also learned to keep my investment properties in different parts of town. A fire burning an entire block can financially ruin a community. My new barbershop in the post office block didn't have the same grandeur as the Augusta Hotel, but it was still an upscale shop. They had 3 chairs, 2 assistant barbers with apprentices, a porter, and bootblacks. I didn't have the volume of customers like before, but the chairs were full every day. The pace was a bit slower, so I had more time with the young men in training. They got a better education, not only with the razor, but with their books. We had a classroom to make sure they all knew how to read and write and how to complete financials for their upcoming business ventures. My wife Penelope was also active in the community. She and the other women of color were members of the Home Literary and Debating Society. This group assisted with family health programs. They also found homes and employment for new arrivals. And they offered education for working girls and women. They also organized the August Ball every year. The August Ball took place on August 1st. It was the celebration of the 1804 Haitian Independence Day. There was a picnic with midday speakers in Levy Park. Later in the evening, there was a dance and fireworks in the park. It was something the black community looked forward to. After 1865, this became known as the Emancipation Day celebration. Later it was called Juneteenth Day. As a result of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, the recruitment of black soldiers became possible. I was proud to recruit the 29th Wisconsin Colored Regiment. Many black soldiers in Wisconsin fought in Louisiana, Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois regiments. We were proud of all who served. You know, Wisconsin was a very progressive state. In 1848, the Wisconsin Constitution granted black men the right to vote. In 1848. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? But there were drawbacks. See, even though black men were given voting rights, there still was confusion. Oftentimes, black men were barred from the ballot box, and this didn't sit well in the community. On October 9th, 1865, a group of us got together in Milwaukee and drafted a new resolution to make the voting box accessible to black men. The referendum failed again. The next month, Ezekiel Gillespie, one of the leaders of our group, attempted to register to vote. He was not allowed, so he sued the Board of Elections. His lawsuit was called Gillespie versus Palmer. The result? The court sided with the voters of Wisconsin. Gillespie won. In 1866, the original referendum of 1849 fully granted black men the right to vote in Wisconsin elections. During the 28 years my family lived here, we had 3 more children, Florence, John Jr., and our youngest, Alice. We were members of LaCrosse's First Baptist Church. All the children attended school, but Florence was the only one to graduate. She graduated from LaCrosse High School with the highest honors. I believe you call it Central High School today. After graduation, She moved to Louisville in 1879 and became a teacher at Eastern Colored School. John Jr. attended school in Louisville and went on to Fisk University. Penelope became dissatisfied with life in La Crosse. This may have been heightened by the death of our daughter, Mary Ellen, in 1878. Penelope returned with our son, John Jr., to Louisville in 1884. I stayed on in La Crosse a little while longer. In 1884, Governor Ross of Wisconsin appointed me to represent Wisconsin at the World Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition in New Orleans. I shared this honor with F.D. Holton, a millionaire from Milwaukee. I was somewhat disappointed, however, when I was assigned to the Hall of the Colored People and its Industries. I don't know if this is what the governor had intended, or if this was what someone in New Orleans had decided. But in the end, I was impressed. Never before had I been surrounded by so many people of color. There were hundreds of interesting and talented people from all over the United States showing us their wares and skills.
John Birney's influence on La Crosse was profound. Besides being very successful and popular, he was a member of the Old Settlers Association of La Crosse. Their goal was to promote the telling of La Crosse history. This group would later become what is known of today as the La Crosse County Historical Society. John Birney later joined his family in Louisville in 1885. His daughter Florence married and had one daughter, Nellie. In later years, Nellie and her mother lived with Penelope and John. John Jr. passed away from typhoid fever in 1890 while attending Fisk University. John Birney passed away in 1917. The family is buried in the historic African American Louisville Cemetery that was established in 1886.
So before we get into the next video, did anyone have any questions or comments for Denise about the video on John Birney?
One thing I did forget to mention that's really important, all of those visuals that you saw, the writing of the scripts was done by our historian, Rebecca Mormon Krieg, who couldn't be with us tonight. But all of the visuals that you saw were the result of a lot of time spent in looking up the visuals that you saw. And some of the costuming also was done thanks to her. I just wanted to get that in there.
So any questions from any of the audience members? Okay, well, I think we could then start the next video on Lydia Moss.
Okay, Lydia Moss. She was one of the few women that had her own barber shop in La Crosse. When I was looking her up in the city records, she was in there, Lydia Moss, barber, and she had a barber shop. And I thought it was really cool that she did what she did. She didn't live out her life in La Crosse, as you'll see from the video. She ended up living with her in-laws in Michigan. But while she was in La Crosse, she had a successful business. She is the daughter-in-law. No, she is the sister of Zachariah Lewis Moss, who was who's in the next video. There's some, so she was married to Henderson Moss, who was the brother of Zachariah Lewis Moss. So both of their families came at the same time. And we're fortunate enough to have the actress who portrayed Lydia Moss with us. So maybe she can say some things after we see the video.
It is good to be back in La Crosse. It's been a while. Now I suppose you're all here for haircuts and shaves. No? I thought I was gonna have a good day today. Now I charge 3 cents for shaves and 5 cents for haircuts. As you may have guessed, my name is Lydia Moss. My gosh, when I left La Crosse in 1877, I never intended to be gone for so long. I've been quite the traveler in my life. It all started when I was a barber on the riverboats. That's where I met my first husband, Henderson Moss. Henderson and I were born free in Virginia in 1824. When we were young, black codes were written. Black codes were laws that deprived people of color of their human rights. Virginia demanded we leave the state. Slave states didn't want free people associating with slaves. They felt free people instigated rebellion. Of course we instigated rebellion. Besides, Virginia was the main slave state for slave auctions, and everyone should have been outraged. As a result, we left with hundreds of other people heading to Indiana. It was during this time that Henderson and I met. We were married in 1845 while working on the Ohio riverboats. During this time, our son Henry and daughter Georgina were born. Our Georgina was so small when we lost her to illness. All we have is her sweet face in my locket. When we arrived in La Crosse in 1857, there were only 5 barbershops servicing 1,000 men. The Lydia Moss barbershop was located between 2nd and 3rd Street on State Street. That's not to be confused with my brother-in-law's barbershop, Zachariah Lewis Moss, on Pearl Street. Zachariah Moss and his wife Mary had moved to La Crosse about the same time we did. It was one reason we came here. The second reason we came here was that women could own businesses in Wisconsin. However, like other businesswomen, customers in my barbershop looked past us, searching for some mysterious male owner. Competitors accused us of using our bloomers and petticoats to get our clients. I see why. Most barbers got together with clients after hours at the boxing ring behind Zachariah's barbershop. They worked the crowd for customers to build up their clientele. My husband would never advertise my shop in this manner, especially since the same men made rude, inappropriate comments to me. Can you imagine my husband and son having to sit silent after hearing rude comments made about me and my barbershop? My husband Henderson was also a barber, and he worked for me. I owned the shop. There was a reason for this arrangement. You see, Henderson and I were also investors and land speculators. I invested in LaCrosse properties where settlers built their homes and businesses. Henderson was more aggressive with his money. He invested in land that might be purchased by the railroad companies. This was always a gamble. I didn't want our investments to be a risk. We did really well with our investments. We had plenty of money. As a result, we were able to live in a beautiful home on Vine Street. We also had enough to assist people in our community. But if Henderson bet wrong on the railroad companies, I didn't want to lose our home or the barbershop as a result. In the 1860s, people became crazy about Turkish baths. These baths became associated with barbershops. Battle Creek, Michigan became the center of this health craze. So Henderson and I decided to move there. We sold our home in LaCrosse and moved. Henry was a teenager at the time. It wasn't so bad there. The black community was much larger than in LaCrosse. Many owned their own businesses and homes. It was exciting to know even Sojourner Truth lived there. It was with great sorrow that my son Henry and I returned to LaCrosse after losing my beloved Henderson in Battle Creek, Michigan in 1864. I reopened my barbershop after returning to LaCrosse, the Moss Thurston barbershop, where Henry became an apprentice. I married George Thurston in October of 1866. Henry wasn't too happy when we married. Just over a year after the death of his father, it was hard for him to accept. Henry married Maggie. Soon after, he moved his family to Iowa. They eventually had 4 children of their own. George and I followed them and relocated to Iowa in 1875. In the 1880s, we were back in Michigan, where George passed away in 1895. After his death, I lived with George's family. My life was filled with adventure, moving throughout the Midwest, often sitting on the train. I wondered if the land underneath the tracks had been one of Henderson's investments. There was an irony with me sitting in a car reserved for people of color. We were good enough in one world, but not quite in the other. We made a good living for ourselves despite the obstacles. Our journeys brought opportunities for our family and success for my business. It filled me with great joy knowing that I've paved the way for other women.
Lydia Moss Thurston lived in Michigan for the remainder of her life. She passed away in 1909.
That was a fun one to video. That was a really enjoyable video. It was a challenge getting the extras, and there was a lot of thanks to Ken's Barber Shop and the Muse Theater, who let us use their barber shops to film some of the barbershop scenes, and the Freight House for letting us use the exterior of one of their trains for the train scene. But it was a very enjoyable video to put together. Wasn't it, Rochelle?
It was. I really enjoyed it.
What was it like being a part of the, well, what are your thoughts about having joined us? You came in at about a year into the project. We were very grateful to meet you. And ever since then, you've really been a champion for the group. What's it like being in the Enduring Families Project?
I know I really have to apologize to Denise because I joined a year later, and I wish I would have joined sooner, but I was really fearful to have a little stage fright. But after I realized what the project was about, and then read the script after when we did the first the live performance for the Literary Debate Society, and then I realized that how significant it was. And then we got into the Moss family of the barbershops, and then I realized after I read the script that how much of an impact that script made to me, because she was a barber. And I'm not sure how many people are on here, but I do see one of my friends who knows that I'm also a barber in real life. I see her massive hair, so I have to say something. But that my life kind of parallels what Lydia has went through. And I did not realize that all the way up until now, that how much my life parallels to Lydia's. We have 2 children. We both like to travel. We both commuted by train a lot. And I did not realize that there was such a parallel to our lives and our experiences, how people treated us. And so I really put a lot of heart into it, because I can feel her in La Crosse when they talk about the, what is it called? The La Crosse, that the ghost La Crosse or whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called, but when they do the ghost stories about La Crosse, I can feel her. Even though she didn't pass away here, I can still feel her presence because she put so much into the community.
Wow, we were lucky to find you. Our paths crossed, and it's been a joy to work with you on these various presentations. Let's see. Any feedback? Oh, I see one person said that she loved it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a challenge, but it's been a good challenge. I like the way these videos have turned out. There's a lot of community involvement. I think you may have recognized one of the people that was a walk-on. It's unfortunate that he didn't have a speaking role. I believe at the time he was working on courses in his PhD work. But Shondell Spivey was a walk-on in both of these past videos, and he just recently completed a successful appearance as Martin Luther King in the La Crosse Community Theater's presentation of The Mountaintop. So there's been a lot of community outreach as a result of these videos. You know, you have a new respect for the credits that go by. You know, no one pays it. Well, a lot of stuff, I didn't used to treasure them as much as I do now, but those credits represent a lot of people that have gone through a lot of hard work to bring these to fruition. It was interesting seeing the challenges of the whole thing was interesting. So
Denise, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I do really want to thank Denise and Rebecca for the amount of work that they put in. Rebecca did such an extraordinary job on costuming for me. And let me tell you, I did not realize that they had to wear so many layers as barbers, and it was hot. It was very hot. And the direction under Denise and Phil Addis was just amazing at the work that they all put in. And I really do appreciate the stories that being told, because I didn't know this history existed in La Crosse until the last several years. And I really wish I had known this when I came here in 1992, because I think that would have made a big difference in the choices that I had made in my life. I would have made them a little sooner. And but I'm glad that I did get to know the stories and the lives that they had here in La Crosse.
Thank you for pointing out Phil. Phil was our videographer for all of these videos. He's not here tonight, I don't think, but yeah, he was the director for all of them. And thank you. If he gets to see this video, okay. I guess that brings us to the next video. All the I've done. Oh, thank you for all the positive feedback, everyone. We sure appreciate the kind words that you have for these videos. The next video, Zachariah and Emma Moss. Zachariah Henry Moss was the son to Zachariah Lewis Moss. So Zachariah Henry Moss would have been a nephew to Lydia Moss. This is the next generation of Zachariah Mosses. So we went with the option to talk more about Zachariah the son rather than Zachariah the father, and integrated some of the things that were known about the father into the son's scene. So he says, my father and I did this, my father and I did that. So we kind of combined the stories of Zach Lewis and Zach Henry, so that because we have Zach Henry's wife, Emma, who is from Cheyenne Valley, and that's another whole section that you heard a little bit about in Jenny's video earlier, and that's going to be the subject of the next round of videos. But yeah, Zachariah Henry Moss was born and raised in La Crosse in 1866, and was a successful barber. He and his father had a gym in the back of their barber shop, and I think even Lydia Moss mentions it, where they try to recruit customers for their store in the boxing ring. And that is why we used the Good Fight Boxing Center as a backdrop for some of those boxing rings. So we were able to get a lot of support from the community, and they've tied in well to the videos. But anyway, back to Zachariah Henry Moss and his wife, Emma Moss. This is their story.
My name is Zachariah Henry Moss, and this is my lovely wife, Emma. My father, Zachariah Lewis Moss, had his shop on Pearl Street between 2nd and 3rd. I learned about barbering there. This is where we lived. Barbers were tonsurless. Now, tonsure means to cut or shave. In the really old days, we would do minor surgery and dental work. That is why the barber pole is painted with a red and white stripe in a diagonal pattern.
LaCrosse was a city built on trade and transportation. Railroads and riverboats brought men into our barbershop. Fashion and necessity brought most of the men every other day for a shave and at least once a month for a haircut. But you lost money on some.
More than some, hundreds of men came and went. 3/4 of them did not want a haircut or a shave for at least 3 months. Lumberjacks and longshoremen were not a group to recruit for haircuts or shaves.
Let's not get too hard on the rivermen. Your father's wealth began with his work on the river.
You're right. A man can't forget where he came from. My father came up the Mississippi River working on packet boats. He was a barber and born a free man in Wheeling, Virginia in 1824.
Thousands of free people of color moved west from Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia after Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831. The black codes had been restrictive prior to the rebellion, but after the rebellion, southern states threatened to arrest and sell free people of color into slavery if they remained in the state.
Then, in 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was signed. Some northern states began writing black codes making even more restrictions. And free people of color were forced out of Ohio and Indiana. I know Emma's family was part of this mass movement from the East Coast, and my family was also.
My sister Ellen was married to Ashley Shivers. They eventually settled in LaCrosse also. Our family, the Waldens, came to Wisconsin from Indiana and settled in Cheyenne Valley, just outside of Hillsborough in Vernon County. I was born there in 1862. Ellen and I came from a large family. Our mother always said it was in the water. Anyway, after spending some time in Baraboo as a teacher, I met Zachariah. We moved back to LaCrosse and married in 1897, a few years before Zach's father died in 1902.
I was born right here in LaCrosse in 1866. Our families knew each other from Cheyenne Valley. My shop was much like my father's. It had 3 chairs. I hired a porter, a bootblack, and 2 barbers. And I offered an apprenticeship to 2 young men a year at least. Each year, many young men moved through the apprenticeship programs offered by John Birney, my brother-in-law, Ashley Shivers, and me.
I was especially proud of their work teaching apprentices to read, write, and prepare for business. I was also particularly proud of what the newspaper said about Zachariah. Go into the new Moss & Son barbershop and see the old hands at work. Take down your old razor to get ground. Get shaved while it is ground. And you'll be sure to leave it there. You'll forget all about your razor. Service. That's what kept Zach in the newspapers.
Oh, and we got in the newspaper for other things too, such as the boxing ring in back of the shop.
Zach, how did you get any work done with all that talk about boxing?
You know, my father and I built our business from the men on the railroad and riverboats. These men love boxing. And Dad and I love boxing. We were great barbers and great bare-knuckle boxers. The busy part of the day started with the train arriving at 8:15 a.m. on the dot. We always had our usual customers, but when the trains pulled in, the men knew where to come, to either Moss & Sons Barbershop or Ashley Shivers Barbershop.
LaCrosse didn't have a union station in the early years. In fact, all the trains had to back in or back out of the city because each railroad company had its own stations along 2nd and 3rd Streets between State and Pearl, where Zach's shops were.
Later, the train station moved to St. Andrews and Rose Streets, and we moved our shop to North Side on Mill Street. I think you call it Copeland Avenue now. Anyway, railroad men were glad to see our shop at the end of their trip. Our Turkish bath and a good shave would be the first thing the customers wanted. I was a good boxer, I always won.
I guess I would be more disturbed by the roughness of it all. But Zach did use the ring to teach the young men how to box. He taught them the value of decency and fair play, and he also cautioned them against unnecessary fights and how to stay out of trouble.
Emma did her fair share in the community as well. She was involved with community circles at the Methodist Church. We also opened up our home to people who needed a place to stay. La Crosse didn't exactly have established black codes by law, but people of color knew when they weren't welcome at restaurants and boarding houses. The Moss and the Shivers families always opened up their homes to apprentices and travelers.
Zach made a good living in his barber shop. We had a very prominent home, and because of that, it was possible for us to be active in our community.
It was easy to do when you offered them a free newspaper and breakfast every morning.
You made up for it with profits and tips. Zach, you know you only charge 5 cents for a haircut?
Hi, my name is Corey Zach Moss, and this is the story of my great-grandparents. My ancestors, the Moss family, lived their entire lives in La Crosse, Wisconsin. They had 3 children. 2 lived to be adults. June was born in 1900. She became a teacher in Cairo, Illinois. Orbis, my grandfather, was born in 1902, and he took up the family tradition of becoming a successful barber in his own right. Joanna was born in 1904. Sadly, she passed away while she was still a child. Emma died in 1935 at the age of 69. Zachariah died in 1938 at the age of 76. They were buried in Revel Cemetery in Dilley, Vernon County, near Joanna, and many of their extended family from Cheyenne Valley.
One thing I wanted to mention, as was the case with Rochelle actually being a barber and portraying a barber with Lydia Moss, Anthony Norris, who portrayed Zachariah Henry Moss, is a barber also. So it was very fortunate that we got 2 barbers to portray barbers in these videos. One of the questions in the chat room has been, how is this information disseminated? You can find the videos on our YouTube channel and also on our website, which is a branch of the website of our fiscal sponsor, the La Crosse County Historical Society. If you go to their website and click Enduring Families, you'll see all of our videos there. But please know that these videos are just the tip of the iceberg. There is a wealth of information that our wonderful historian Rebecca Mormon Krieger has put together. And she's put all this information in a link. And if you want more information, you can access that link by going to the La Crosse County Historical Society's website, and they can send you the link. But there's a lot more if you are interested. The next step is implementing those links to use in classrooms. I've heard from several people that have said their children are watching the videos in their classes. But now the teachers can have those links with primary documents using the research, the research documents that Rebecca used to put all this information together to develop additional class activities or whatever. But there is more supplemental information available because this is just the tip.
Really quick. Being a barber in La Crosse, I encounter lots of people, hundreds of people per month. And it's been really cool because I tell the story about the Enduring Families Project to those who are stuck in my chair. But when I mentioned the Moss family, I've had at least 2 to 3 people that say, oh my gosh, I knew the Moss family. And they start talking about the John and Orby and the family. And so I think it's really cool that the history is still there because the people who sit in my chair are in their late 60s, early to late 70s. And so it's pretty cool. I do have a client who's 97 years old. And when I see her, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'm going to ask her because she's been in La Crosse her entire life. And I really want to see if she has any firsthand information about the Moss family as well.
Two things. One of the questions says they wanted the cemetery is located in Vernon County. If you go down Highway, I think 33, it's called Forest Hill Cemetery. And that's where Ashley Shivers is buried, as well as some of the other people from Cheyenne Valley. Also, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but I am going to put him on the spot. There you are, Orby. Orby Moss, my brother-in-law. I was wondering if there's any kind of shout out that you or any of the others would like to share with us about the Moss family in La Crosse.
Well, I just have to give all of you who produce this a big hand. As you know, Denise, I tried to write a book and include my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather several years ago, and that task was took me 2 winters. And to see what you all have done with the research, especially the research, has just amazed me. The people that you have doing the acting have done a good job, and I'm pointing out to my kids right now that you have a history. It's a real Black history. And just thanks again to you and Rebecca and people at the public library and all the rest of you who have taken interest in this.
Just to point out, at the end of the Zachariah Moss video, the narrator was Corey Zachariah Moss. That was Orby's son. Just wanted everyone to know that. I was wondering, John told me, but I didn't click at the time. He said that when you all were growing up, you had in your house some famous like Duke Ellington and Count Basie, or some of the people that were in your house, right? And they stayed with you all?
You know, I was too young to even know who they were. But I recall my dad and my mother talking about who came through and who they let stay for a night or so. And, you know, they were from, I think they're on their way from Milwaukee or somewhere, Chicago, going up to the Twin Cities, and La Crosse was a stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I brought that up was in the video, Emma Moss says that they always had room in their house for people that wanted to stay because the hotels and the restaurants wouldn't let them stay. So when stay in those hotels. So when I first found out that you all had all these famous people in your homes, my first impulse was, oh boy, that's really exciting, until I realized that, you know, it was because the hotels wouldn't take them. And that was in your time. So that would have been like, you know, the 50s. So this kind of practice was going on for a while until, well, it was going on for a while, not just way back when. It was in your lifetime, in my lifetime.
In the 40s. My lifetime.
Yeah.
My lifetime. In the 40s is when all that happened, because I would have been maybe a toddler.
Okay.
Maybe just starting school.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What is the next step, the EFP in the future? The curriculum. As I said, the idea is to get this information into the schools so that the young people will know the history. That's why we went through so much trouble, so much effort to make sure the videos were good. So because we can't be doing in-person appearances forever, the virus kind of wiped a lot of that out. And when the virus came along, the videos really helped in keeping the stories going. And now with additional primary documents to supplement the material from the videos, teachers, libraries, historical societies can keep the history going even after we're no longer able to do in-person appearances. But with future plans in the near future, the Enduring Families Project is going to be doing some in-person presentations at we're doing something at Central High School. We are doing a presentation at Onalaska High School. So we're getting into the high schools and doing some in-person things, supplemented by the primary documents. But then we're also going to be at this year's Juneteenth celebration in Riverside Park. And we're going to try to also having an August ball. You heard mention of the August ball. Some of the people were talking about the August ball, and we're going to keep that history going and try to recreate an August ball and have a June court, which will be presented at the Juneteenth celebration in La Crosse. And we want to have the August ball the first Saturday in August to keep that going, to keep that history going. We will have an appearance at the McIntosh Memorial Library in April to focus on the Cheyenne Valley segment of our presentations. Will be one of the descendants of Tom Shivers. The Shivers family was a very prominent family in Cheyenne Valley. Alja Shivers helped to construct some of the round barns there. Well, one of those descendants is going to be a speaker talking about the Cheyenne Valley portion, and we'll be showing videos of Thomas Shivers and Ashley Shivers for that one. So that's some some presentations that we'll have in the near future. Ultimately, it'll come down to the videos and primary documents as far as our future is concerned. So
Denise, can I say a few things?
Yes, Wendy.
Oh, this is Wendy Madison. I just want to thank you, Denise and Rebecca, and the whole group of Enduring Families for doing this work. And I just want to give a little bit of a perspective, because I was teaching in the mid 90s and looking for information that we could use about African Americans in this community. And I was able to find information to work with fourth graders about the Moss family. There were bits of pieces at the archives, at the university historical collections. And also I found Orby Moss's book that I think, Orby, you had donated to the La Crosse Public Library. But we had very little to work with, very little to work with. And so I see the work that you have done. And I know you and Rebecca have been working for the last 5, 6, 7 years to do this research, to do the cross research, moving into Cheyenne Valley, moving into Sparta, and bringing all of these other stories to life. So as I was watching this video and then ending with seeing, was it Corey Moss?
Yeah.
I was just, I mean, my eyes just welled, because this information we have been looking for decades. And you and Rebecca and others have pulled it together. You have brought the Enduring Families community together to bring it to life, and to watch the actors to bring words to this history is absolutely remarkable. And I'm so grateful because of what you are now providing to the students of La Crosse, because teachers can pause these videos, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And they can pause these videos when they get to the code, to the Black codes, for example, and spend some time talking about this, or to the images that you have brought up of various places within this community that give context to the history of this community. So you have provided a wealth of history about La Crosse moving into today. So I just can't thank you enough for what you have accomplished.
Wow.
Thank
you. I don't know what to say to that. Thank you. Thank you seems so minor, but man, it sure is nice to hear those get a tap on the back. I have a copy of Orby's book in the back room. If someone wants to talk, I'm going to turn off my video and go get it. If anyone else wants to talk for a minute while I go and get it. No? Well, okay. I'll stay.
Sure, I can
Okay.
say something. Sure. Well, you know, and like Denise had said, that the videos are on the La Crosse County Historical Society's YouTube channel. They're also the earlier recordings of the previous showings we've done, which were the videos, and then some of the questions and talkbacks like now are also on the La Crosse Public Library YouTube channel as well. So you can see just the videos themselves of the Historical Society, but you can see some of the actors interviewed and things like that on the library's YouTube channel.
Is this the book you're referring to, Orby?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Now the library. I saw this in the library, but when Orby wrote this, he gave the family members copies of the book too. But yeah, it's in the archive section of the library. Yeah, the Mosses were the only family that stayed. Everyone else left, and Jenny's contextual video told about, you know, why everybody else left, that they couldn't get the jobs. Or I thought that was really interesting, seeing how much of a thriving Black community there was, and then slowly but surely everybody left except one lonely, you know, one family stayed. But yeah, I found that part of the video very interesting, because I didn't know there were any other Black folks that lived here when I first moved here. I thought it was just the Moss family from the beginning. I didn't know there was a thriving Black community. So it's interesting. Can Orby's book be purchased now? Can your book be purchased now, Orby?
I don't know how.
Yeah.
I only made enough copies for the family members for Christmas.
Oh.
You have to check it out at the library.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's in the archive section of the library. You can get a look at it. Would it be during the time when they were the only family? Is there something about the Moss family during the time when they were the only Black family? All I can tell you is it was difficult. I've heard my husband tell his stories, Orby, you might have some others, but it was interesting. They all went to Logan High School, is that correct? Logan High School. And if you go through the there's a wall of success, and Orby's picture is up there, and Raymond's and John's. I think Raymond was on a golf team, John was on the wrestling team and a football team, right, John? Football, oh, he's taking it. But football and wrestling, and you can see these pictures of the teams and the one lone face there. It's like, the proverbial fly in the glass of buttermilk. But at other times, there were a few others there other people of color there every once in a while, but the Mosses were the ones that stayed. And the people that Rochelle refers to, oh, I knew Orby this and I knew Raymond that, they would have been classmates that grew up and went to school with Orby and John and Raymond. So I think that's any other questions that I'm missing from the chat that people want to talk about verbally. I guess the silence means no. So are we, what do we do now, Barry?
Well, so we've been very lucky to sort of broadcast these for the Enduring Families Project, and we'll be doing the next series hopefully in March or early April then, right? And that would sort of close out that first chapter of Enduring Families Project videos.
And that will cover Cheyenne Valley. We will, Ashley Shivers was a brother-in-law of Zachariah Henry Moss, and he had a barber shop in La Crosse, but he was a farmer in Cheyenne Valley and migrated to La Crosse. His brother, Thomas Shivers, stayed in Cheyenne Valley and was a very innovative farmer, and Thomas's son, Alja, helped build some of the round barns in the area. So that segment of Cheyenne Valley is what will be talked about. Also, if you watch Channel 19 News, those of you that are local, even if you're not local, it's on the website. Dustin Lutke put together some segments on Black lacrosse. He invited us to come in. I came in and did the interviews. And we talked about various segments of lacrosse history. These are aired on Mondays during the month of February. On February 7th, I focused on two lacrosse residents that made national prominence. George Pogue with the 2 bronze medals at the Olympics in 1904, and George Edwin Taylor, who was the first African-American to run for president in 1904. So those were the first 2 for national prominence. Then the second week, we focused on 3 of the 4 barbers, Zachariah Moss, Ashley Shivers, and John Birney. I know, Rochelle, I'm getting to you in a minute. But those were the 3 that we did for the Barbers of La Crosse. The third week, next week, is going to focus on Cheyenne Valley. Ashley Shiver, Thomas Shivers. And then in the fourth week, we focus on the women of La Crosse. And that is where we will talk about Lydia Moss having her own barber shop, Lillian Davenport, a musician who went on to be a vaudeville singer. And then the women of we will also talk about how the women formed this society called the African American Literary and Debate Society. And they organized the August Ball that was held each year to celebrate the liberation of enslaved people, first in Haiti and then later on in the United States. And we talk about the one August Ball that was held in La Crosse in 1887, August 1st, and how we hope to emulate it with this upcoming August Ball that we're going to have on August 6th. So two of them have aired. So Cheyenne Valley and Women of La Crosse will be the next segments that are seen. And if you're not local, you can go to the website WXOW, and they have the videos from those interviews that you can look at.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight, and we'll see you next time on the next airing of the Enduring Families Project videos.
Thank
Have a good
you,
night, folks.
Barry. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.